Hello and welcome back. This is Dr. Science here, and today we're going to be talking about acidosis and alkalosis, and the difference between the two, and what constitutes acidosis and what constitutes alkalosis. So some prerequisites, if you haven't already, please go and watch the pH video. It'll kind of go and give you a little update on what you're going to need to know. Again, like a prerequisite there, you will need to know what pH is, how pH is affected, what makes a basic solution, what makes an acidic solution, what makes a base, what makes an acid. I'll briefly touch over on that because it does come up in this lecture, but today another prerequisite for you is knowing what a buffer is. And if you don't know what a buffer is, a buffer is basically it acts as a stabilizer to minimize a change in the pH. So if a solution is too basic, the buffer acts by donating an H plus ion. And if you don't know what an H plus ion, please go back and look over the pH video because, again, I do talk about the differences between H plus ion and an OH minus ion. But going back to what a buffer is, the buffer acts by donating an H plus ion to a basic solution, and it acts as donating an H plus to a basic solution and taking away an H plus, accepting an H plus in a acidic solution. So once we have that down, what we're going to be talking about today is a carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer. Sounds really big. It's not that scary, trust me. By the end of it, I know that you'll go and get this down. And what that basically is a formula for conversion of CO2 in the bloodstream to carbonic acid and its byproducts. So basically what the formula states is you have H2O plus CO2 yields carbonic acid, which is H2CO3. And what you have from that is HCO3 minus, which is bicarbonate ion, plus the H plus hydrogen ion. Now these equations do go back and forth, so you're going to have two arrows pointing in that direction. And of course, you're going to have two arrows pointing in that direction over there, and we'll talk about the reasons why for that later on. But now jumping into it, let's talk about acidosis versus alkalosis, the huge chunk of this lecture. So what acidosis is, if you can't take it away from the name, because that's one of the beautiful things about biology, is that the names often tell you what it's describing. Okay? So we have acidosis, and if you couldn't already guess, it has something to do with an acid. It's when the blood pH is too acidic. Human blood pH is at a perfect 7.4. Not too neutral and not too basic. It's 7.4. So we can obviously assume, if you watched my other video, that on the pH scale, acids are what? Higher in number or lower in number? They're lower in number. So acidosis occurs when our blood pH falls below a 7.35. Our body doesn't like that. Our body likes that 7.4, doesn't like 7.35. That's too acidic. Now, what might cause this? What causes acidosis is hypoventilation, breathing too little. Think about it this way. Another little trick that I use to memorize alkalosis and acidosis and the causes of them and the examples of them would be hypoventilation. Hippos are very slow, right? So you breathe too little. Hippos are very slow. They go at a very slow pace. You're breathing very slow. Hypoventilation. Some examples of hypoventilation could be pneumonia and emphysema. Those are very common cases of when we have hypoventilation. So now let's go connect this back to the carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer solution, the formula that I that I explained at the top, which I hope you guys wrote down. We have an increased CO2. Think about it. When we breathe in, what do we breathe in? Oxygen. Then that goes through and converts through cellular respiration, and we breathe out CO2. That's all carbon dioxide being breathed out. Okay. So now all of a sudden, by definition, hypoventilation, I am now breathing too little. So what does that mean? That means that I'm going to have more CO2 in my body than I am breathing out. So that's why we have an increase in our CO2. So now when we have an increase in our CO2, that leads to what? An increase in our carbonic acid, an increase in H2CO3. What will that lead to in our bloodstream? What will that lead to? That will lead to an increased concentration of H plus ions. And if you look back at my other video, what constitutes what has a greater concentration of H plus ions as opposed to the OH minus ions? Acids. That's why acidosis will have an increased amount of H plus ions because it's acidic now, and it's going to have a decreased pH because, again, looking at the pH scale in my video, in my prior video, acids are numbers 1 through 6, while bases are numbers 8 through 14. That's why acidosis, looking at this equation, these are the causes of acidosis. The increased amount of CO2 in your body does all of this, to you, and it affects your bloodstream in a negative way by a decreased amount of pH. Now, this can be corrected, though. Thankfully, this can be corrected. One correction, obviously, is breathing more, inhaling more. You want to get that CO2 out of your bloodstream, that bad CO2, and you want that good oxygen, that good O2 into your bloodstream. That's a simple fix. Another solution is adding HCO3. Again, what is a buffer? A buffer is either accepting an H plus or donating an H plus. Now, what do we want to do in this case? What do we want to do in cases of acids? We don't want an acid. We don't want 7.35. So what are we going to do? We're going to go and accept an H plus ion. We want to accept that extra concentration, that high concentration of H plus ions in the bloodstream. Because our bloodstream doesn't want that. So how do we correct that? Looking at bicarbonate, the bicarbonate ion, it is HCO3 minus. That minus, think about it, -1 and +1. They'll cancel each other out. It's 0. So that'll fix the problem. That's why adding HCO3 minus is a perfect solution when it comes to acidosis. Now, moving on, we have alkalosis. And again, thinking about biology, biology is a beautiful subject. Acidosis, alkalosis, the solution is in the name. So alkalosis, think of alkaline water. Alkaline water has a very high pH. So you can kind of assume that it's going to be basic. It's going to have a low concentration of the H plus ions. So looking over here, alkalosis is when the blood pH is too basic. Again, it's a decrease now in the concentration of your H plus ions, as to where the acidosis was what? An increase in the concentration of your H plus ions. Increase. Alkalosis, complete opposite for everything from acidosis. Moving on, our blood pH rises to what? What would you think that since acidosis falls below the 7.4, a normal blood pH, alkalosis is going to rise? Because again, basic solutions are numbers 8 through 14. Or anything after 7 is basic. Anything after, anything just a little away from 7 is going to be a little acidic. So our blood pH is going to rise above 7.45 above. Now the causes for alkalosis is, again, the opposite of acidosis, hyperventilation, breathing too much. Think about it, hyper. You're really hyper, you're running around. What are you doing? You're breathing a lot. That's one way to go memorize that. Some examples of hyperventilation: stress and anxiety. Happens to all of us students, right before a test. That stress is going to hit us big time. And we are definitely going to be hyperventilating a lot. Now, we're going to go connect alkalosis with the carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer. So, what do you think? I was describing the opposite of it. If you want, you can go ahead and pause the video and write down what you guess is going to be happening. But really quickly, if you want to go and pause the video, you can try to go and solve it. But for those of you who aren't, I'm going to go walk it through step by step with you. So you're going to have now a decrease in your CO2. Remember, in acidosis, you were breathing too little. You were holding in that CO2. Now you're breathing out that CO2 at a very, very, very high rate. So what's that going to do? That's going to decrease your CO2. It's right there. You're going to decrease your CO2. What does that lead to? A decreased amount of carbonic acid in your bloodstream. Okay. Then, what is that furthermore going to lead to? You're going to lead to a decrease in your H plus concentration, which will then lead to an increase in your pH. You see, that's the beautiful thing about biology. Everything follows a certain steps, and it all makes sense. Everything falls in line. Everything follows the rule. Nothing goes on an opposite track. It all makes perfect sense, but you need to go and slow it down and write it in a way where you understand it, where you can go and break it down and say to yourself, "This is how I like teaching myself. This is how I understand it more. Let me go and do that. Let me go work on it. Let me go and tweak some things here and there to go and help me understand this." So now, what can correct alkalosis? It can be corrected by adding carbonic acid, adding H2CO3 to your buffer solution into your bloodstream, and also breathing into a paper bag. Think about it. You're breathing out CO2, you're breathing out way too much CO2, and, your body says, hey, you know what? CO2 isn't bad in this case. I want some CO2. When you blow into a paper bag, what are you doing? You're blowing the CO2 into the paper bag, and then you're breathing back in the CO2 in the paper bag. So that's one solution to it. Hopefully this video answered your questions, and it helped you understand a little bit more about acidosis versus alkalosis. I hope that this equation will make more sense to you. I understand that a lot of the times, some teachers might rush over some things, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to go and take my time with this subject and really stress that this isn't hard. That this can be done. Students can go and learn these subjects. Carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer, that scared me as a student when I was learning it. I was like, whoa, this is a really big word. I didn't know how to go and tackle it. But, my teacher helped me through it, and now I wish to go and help all of you and help you guys understand this subject as well. So thank you so much. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Dr. Science here. If you would like to go and hear some more topics or like me to go and discuss something, please write it down in the comment section below. Thank you so much. Dr. Science signing out.